In the 1870s, the reborn White Star Line launched 4 successful vessels, the first 4 Oceanic-class ships: the Oceanic, the Atlantic, the Baltic, and the Republic. And with the success of these 4 vessels, they quickly ordered 2 more of the same class, the first of those being the Adriatic. Today, let's talk about the White Star Line's second flagship, the SS Adriatic. Like her sisters, the SS Adriatic was built at Harland and Wolff in Belfast and was launched on October 17, 1871, with her maiden voyage being in April of the following year, on April 11th, 1872. Her maiden voyage put her on the main route that White Star liners were following across the North Atlantic, leaving from Liverpool, visiting Queenstown before heading across the ocean to New York. It's worth noting at this point that the Adriatic is actually a little bit larger than the 4 existing Oceanic-class liners, making her the flagship of the line's fleet, and she would serve as the flagship of the White Star Line until the launch of the Britannic in 1874, so for 2 years she was the White Star Line's flagship, taking the title from the Oceanic, which had held that prestige from being the first. Just a month into her service, she took the speed record as well when she seized the blue ribbon from Cunard's Scotia. The westbound crossing in which the Adriatic seized the blue ribbon took her 7 days, 23 hours, and 17 minutes. During most of that trip, she maintained an average speed of a little over 14 knots, making her one of the fastest liners on the North Atlantic. On January 4th, 1873, the Adriatic came across the bark the Carmen, which had become waterlogged, and rescued her crew, which would become the first major event of her career, aside from seizing the blue ribbon. On October 24th, 1874, the Adriatic was involved in her first collision when she collided with the steamship Parthia, a Cunard steamer, outside of New York Harbor. Ultimately, this collision forced the Adriatic back into port, where she would undergo minor repairs before returning to service. On March 8, 1875, the Adriatic was involved in yet another collision when she rammed and sank the 3-masted schooner Columbus. Adriatic did not stop to pick up survivors from Columbus, however, and just kept on steaming, leaving another ship to come by and pick up these survivors, another steamer named the Enterprise. That's a mistake that the Adriatic's crew would not repeat later that year when on December 31st, 1875, the Adriatic would collide with the Blackball Line's Harvest Queen in the Irish Sea, sinking that ship. The Adriatic would remain on the scene to collect survivors and offer assistance, however, no survivors were ever recovered and no one survived the wreck of the Harvest Queen. As such, the Adriatic would simply continue on her way and would ultimately be found not liable for the collision. Interestingly, the crew of the Adriatic didn't know that they had hit the Harvest Queen, they just knew that they had hit a ship, and it wouldn't be until they arrived in New York that they would find out the identity of the ship that they had actually rammed and sank. July 19th, 1878 would be an interesting day for the Adriatic. She would start that day with a collision with the Hengist, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, a small schooner, where they collided in the fog. And then later that day, while speeding through the same fog, she collided with the G.A. Pike, a small schooner, sinking that ship and killing all 5 on board. The Adriatic would ultimately be blamed for excessive speed in fog. In 1884, the Adriatic was brought in for major refits, where she was given a second class, a refit that was going on with a bunch of the Oceanic-class liners, which were built as 2-class liners. She was given 50 second-class berths, allowing her to carry 50 second-class passengers, on top of her complements of first and third-class passengers. On May 24th, 1889, tragically, a steerage passenger jumped overboard from the Adriatic intentionally, and efforts were made to recover the lost passenger. He ultimately did not survive. Later that year, on October 4th, 1898, she would collide with the piers in New York, where her anchor would dig a 50-foot gash into the side of the pier. No one was hurt, but it did do a significant amount of damage. And by 1897, she was deemed to have been too old to remain in service, with newer White Star liners like the Teutonic and her sister the Majestic entering service. The Adriatic was deemed old and unnecessary and was pulled from service. She would remain a reserve ship for a few more years. However, in 1899, when the Oceanic, the second Oceanic, would enter service, the Adriatic would officially be retired and sold for scrap later that year. Ultimately, that wraps up the long and eventful career of the first White Star liner named Adriatic. She was one of the Oceanic class, and if you'd like to learn about the specifications of the Oceanic class or the careers of any of her sisters, I'll leave a link up here to my playlist on the Oceanic class, where you can learn about the careers of her sisters or the specifications of the class as a whole. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Barbette and Binnacle, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.